Okay, so as I was saying, my name is Winetta Ayers. I'm the Executive Director for Commonwealth North. And thanks for joining us today, whether you're here in person or you're watching the recorded version of the program later on. We thank you for joining us and for your interest in today's topic. We want to acknowledge that we're on the traditional homelands of the Deena people, and that Alaska is the homeland for more than 200 Alaskan Native tribes, and we're appreciative of their generosity, resilience, and diversity. We also want to acknowledge our volunteers, Carol Anderson and Margaret Teams, who have helped us with our registration and check-in process. Thank you, Carol and Margaret. We usually don't have them in the room when we say that, so Commonwealth North is a membership-based organization. We do have membership information on the table for you. Our members help support what we do, and we're grateful to them as well. So we welcome your interest in membership. If you have that, and happy to talk to you about it at any time. Also, we want to acknowledge our sponsors for our programs. ConocoPhillips and Alaska Communications have been our FilmNet sponsors throughout the year, and we're appreciative of their support as well. So please, again, help me thank our volunteers, members, and sponsors. So I'm going to be brief in terms of our introduction for the program, but Commonwealth North is very interested in engaging on educational policies at this point in time, largely because we feel that there's still a lot of questions the general public has, and even people who are actively engaged in public policy shaping have questions about how we fund education, what are we getting for our money, what are the outcomes, and what kind of innovations and new models of educational delivery should we be considering in our state because of our vast geography and diversity. So we've invited Commissioner Deena Bishop with the Alaska Department of Education and Early Development to be our speaker today. And joining her is her colleague, Lori Lee, who's the school finance manager. And our format today is going to be simple. We'll hear from both Commissioner Bishop and Lori Lee, and then we'll have questions from the audience. You have blue cards and some pens on your table. Feel free to jot down any questions that you have throughout the presentation. I'll be collecting those and we'll be fielding those questions. Please understand, we may not get to every question. We may not get to every question exactly as it is written or posed because we'll be sort of curating them and combining topics into one question. So with that, let me bring Commissioner Bishop to the lectern. She's well known to all of us here in Anchorage and throughout the state for the 30-year career in education, and it's a pleasure to advise her here today. Thank you so much. I can see so many familiar faces in the crowd. Lori and I, once we get this rolling, I think we do have finished. Well, probably to our presentation, but we were asked to start with the fundamentals as the title shares. And we're going to, although I am trained as an educator in math, that was my degree. It's always good to have an expert on the state colonially go with us today. So I wanted to be sure that the finance director was here. So, and if we can't answer them in the room, we'll follow up. So as was shared, I'm Deena Bishop, and I have had, this is my, since 1990, so I'm entering my 35th year as a school person, if you will. Actually, I should say I was a school person since I was 4 because I entered school as a 4-year-old. But for those that enter later in life, I actually have to go into education from another career. I want to give a shout out because I have found that some of our best teachers are those who I've been in the real world before they come to teaching. So I always want to put that plug out there, and we're always open for new educators. So funding, education formulas and fundamentals. So we'll start with just an overview about the department. We like to start grounding ourselves in the mission, vision, and purpose from the Department of Education, and the state school board set these out. It's always focused on the middle one. As a school principal or a teacher, superintendent, it was very difficult no matter what assessments you had to judge yourself on, or how kids did, or how you did, or how your teachers feel, until your primary mission of kids being able to do what they want to do and meet their dreams and goals and be contributing, people, happy contributing people in society. you don't know if you succeeded. So there isn't a number that can tell us that except for when kids leave us, and that's really about the vision. Can kids, will they, when they come off the schools, know and be able to do something that's going to meet their dreams and wishes for their family and their lives? The strategic priorities were organized almost 10 years ago, and it actually started under Governor Walker and has continued for 10 years. It was a group of over 300 people from around the state coming together to talk about what was important, what is Alaska's education challenge, and they're really in these 5 core areas is the primary work out of the department. So today, the state foundation formula, we're going to just get into that, and it was very clear with a direction from Representative Johnston that make sure you include pictures. And so some of the pictures you see in past years, I've worked with this phenomenal person who is now at UA. Anyone from the university system here? And his name was Luke Folk. He is a phenomenal CFO who can communicate as well. And that's a skill. He just was able to do that. And originally, he designed these pictures, and we've had a legacy at Anchorage of using them, as well as it continues in Matsu to use them. And so these particularly came from Matsu, the CFO there, Katie Gardner, assisted us, and then we adjusted hers to make them statewide. And then we're going to talk about the statistics. The amount of money that really is. It's simple statistics. What does that look like in not only the state aid, but the basic need, and kind of break those down so that we can really look at where is the almost $1.5 billion going and how is it dispersed and how did it get there? And then finally, we're going to go into a couple of legal cases in regard to just discussing the formula and some of the positions that districts have taken through legal action, as well as individuals have taken, understanding Alaska's education, because we want it to improve, and it seems like through litigation we try to get there, but then the outcomes of those and about why then, even after having the statehood, understanding this formula, why it's still so tricky. Why is it so difficult to thread that needle and to get where we want with our children with all these opposing sides? And we're going to show you how that all is woven into the finances. And then as seen through legal cases. The legal cases were originally presented by John Cedar, who is also a friend of education. He is a lawyer in Anchorage here, but also does presentations around the state. And we ask him to borrow these because he's a fun guy and he shows things in a fun way. So there we go.
All right. And because education has a lot of alphabets, these are ones that are going to show up in the presentations. Many of you are probably familiar with ADN being the average student membership, which is different than enrollment. So you see different numbers out there for student counts, then the AD one is the differences. The BSA is the base student allocation. You're in education funding. I'm sure that you all use that term, but it's always helpful to lay it out. You might see briefly. And CTE, so career technical education, also called VOCED, with vocational education, and then required local contribution with the RLs. So just in case we spurt one of those out there, you'll know what we're talking about. So get right into the state foundation formula. The way it is laid out in the statute, we start with brick and mortar ADS, right? And this is all as picture said. So
I'm just going to add is brick and mortar ADF as opposed to those that are in correspondence schools and brick and mortar schools. So just so you know the difference. So as total, you'll see over, but sorry to interrupt, but just I'm going to, do it at an even a more basic level. So a school building that you'll go into a traditional school, including charter schools, alternative schools, as opposed to the only other thing that is not in there is correspondence, which we'll get to. So when you are in the formula, the first step that we do is adjust for school size. And why do we adjust for school size? Because at a fundamental level, economies of scale, a school has to operate, has to have a minimum number of staff, be it a principal, a maintenance person, the teachers, admin. There are base costs regardless of how big your school is. But as you're
as your count of students gets bigger and you're being funded per student, right, you can make up a little bit of extra. So in the formula, small students or small schools get a bigger adjustment for school size, where larger schools get a smaller adjustment for school size. And then once we've adjusted for school size, we apply a district cost factor. We're all well familiar that it costs much different to, as you say, buy food, hire teachers in Anchorage than it is in other parts of the state. So Anchorage has a district cost factor of 1, and then Yukon Flats has a district cost factor of 2.116. So those are our two extremes in the formula. Everybody else falls in between.
And can I share? This has been something of interest as of late. The last cost size factor was done about 20 years ago. And so we do want to update it because there's some contention. But again, I mean, here's the thing. When you reopen it, people are going to feel like winners and losers. And so that's why it's very trepidatious with legislators to open this up. It was once you open something up, then what about changing this, and this? And so it would cause some instability before it became more stable again. Additionally, I mean, just in focusing, what we are multiplying are the number of students. So this isn't money. We're taking student count, or ADM count, not even student count of enrollment, basically like an FTE, a full-time equivalent, rather than the number, because you could have 2 part-time kids equal 1 ADM. And you're starting to multiply it. One value of our state, what do we value here?
Yes.
With this first one. Bodies. Well-paid bodies, that is our funding formula, is particularly around people, those students that we educate. But we value small education areas. And I'll share that I was a superintendent of 2 large school districts, and I would try to navigate that one, because once you became too big, every dollar is less. So Westilla High was the largest school in the valley, quite a lot larger schools here, but once you hit over 1,100 students, you start to receive less per pupil. So do you see like the tension that this could cause? Like there is a sweet spot, if you will, in elementary schools. Once you hit over 450 kids, you start getting less. So you want to balance school sizes with amount of revenue. And then when you really could combine schools, because the state of Alaska, like anywhere, is losing, our younger student. We don't have as many younger people in the population that we used to 20 years ago. So less kids are coming in, right? So you say consolidate a school. So do you understand like the difficulty for legislators and all these other people in this mix, that if I consolidate a school, but wait a minute, a school is part of my funding. So if I eliminate a school, what's that value? And for me, actually Senator Von Eckhoff assisted years ago to put in a clause that would ratchet down the funding formula. It was called hold harmless. And we had some incentive then to combine schools, because prior to that, schools make money. Outside of it, the students are first, but then where they go, and then not to say it makes money, but it generates funds for your school district, and then where you live also does that. So the questions that might seem very simple from the outside, like, of course, you can get better economies scale because put these kids together, put these kids together. But when your formula values that, it was difficult conversations. And I would say that more movement has happened in the state of Alaska since that full Congress went in to think bigger, because we don't want to keep putting capital and money into buildings that we're not going to ever use in the future. So that was a balance, and I just want to say the legislature, those that were involved in passing that at the time, that generated some change, and it was a positive change. So, and I'm just going to keep doing this with the expert from a person who, on the practical side, and a school district had to run as a state, as with someone who administers the law. And we work together. That's okay. And we're yeah.
And to the point about revisiting the cost factor for districts, the diffraction has a bootstrap change cost back, geographic cost factor that it runs, and it did update, been updating it for 6 years though, and then last year. It was interesting to see how it changed. So because the costs at our base, Anchorage, had increased, it actually lowers some other geographic areas relative to Anchorage, which I thought was extremely interesting. So they're supposed to get resistant, so I'm not exactly results. Taking down. And you can definitely see how the numbers have been, up student count at the ADM have been increasing. We started with 105. By the time we adjusted for school size, we're at 131. And then by the time we adjusted for district cost factors, we're at almost 160 count to be multiplied eventually, right, to the ESA. And we've gone into set 3. This is where we add some factors, or a factor of 20% or 1 by 2 factor to accommodate kind of special education types. So acknowledging that there are some programs that may cost more and then be value and to states. So those meant to incorporate funding for bilingual education, special education to both tech and predicting out that, and by the time we apply that 1.2 factors, we'll head up to 91,000. And then we do specialize book ed specifically. So we get a cost factor of 1.5%. So increase into a little bit, but every little bit kind of add up. And then we add to the intensive special education students. And each special education student is already counted in the ADM, but then we multiply them by 15, and then we add that to the ADM. So acknowledging that an intensive special student, so this is a person who has multiple needs to need, speech therapy or parent that accompanies them all day, also the shaker needs, and then those also then get added in. So we take a pretty large jump. We have a lot of intensive students, was a 3 to 237. Right. And then we added our correspondence. So correspondence are adjusted at a 0.9 factor, so they are not a whole student. My understanding is that they don't require as much in-person, not supporting, they're not in a facility traditionally, so that it's one reason when they have been reduced. So at the end, our statewide adjusted ADM is 256,814.
So in speaking about this, although the factors are increased by, they really are multipliers that really give value to the BSA. So when we say PSA, BSA, everybody says do BSA. Actually, the BSA is down at this number, or 6,930, or what is it now? Yeah. So it's increasing by 680 this year, but the value rose. However, it does go to one pot. It's not like the federal government, or they're going to block grant off something that says this is what you spend this on. It actually goes to one big pot, and it's at the district level that those decisions are made. And then we're going to share some cases about that conflict of, we really want to see, these achievements and outcomes, but how are funding connected to them in the bigger picture.
So total AVM times our current BSA. So just remember that there additional funding on top of that this year. It's not in statute, so it's not within the state age recycling population at this point. And so we have $1.1 billion
And with that 680 that is outside of the BSA formula is another $175 billion to school districts this year. Approximately. So the frustrations, these are district frustrations, but they could be statewide frustrations. of course, everyone, we've all been in school, so we're an expert, so we should see. And I just shared one of the things about the decisions that are made at the local level. When you know your resources and your funding are based off of this formula, you try to really think about that formula and being able to provide the most resources to your students. The timeline for the state is it conducive to when districts are statutorily required to give their budgets. So a lot of the budgeting, all the budgeting that I've ever done outside of honestly, during the Palin, Parnell leadership, there were multipliers every year. So one year we knew that next year it's going to go up, $100, $150, and next year it's going to be this. So there was some pre-understanding. They passed legislation. It hadn't been funded, of course. It wasn't a guarantee. But that was the last time it ended in Walker's administration. So there was about 3 years where school districts knew what the funding would be, but it didn't mean that school districts did not go advocate for additional funds. It just meant that we knew what the basic funding was going to be. The politics are unpredictable because we just don't know at the local level what the decisions will be made and what's valued, as well as the statewide level. There are attempts to oversimplify an incredibly complicated and large-scale process to one number, because lots of different districts, as we said, have different needs. There's different advocacy for things, and so we have a large state with different interests, different priorities, and then we're putting it into one formula and saying, okay, let's figure it out. And then we're also asking to make improvements, which I think the public has. People who are saying let's get to school and anyone else who's invested in public education as a cornerstone of really our democracy, then they should, we want kids that can know and do things, to work and to be happy and to add to society. When kids are young, I've always said when I work with principals that they're consumers. They're consumers of the state. Kids consume at the state level, and then we want them to be contributors when they graduate, right? So, there is a lack, we lack a common and consistent understanding of measuring success in education. That when we say we want better outcomes, what does that mean and whom is it meant for? I would say that one of the, during my tenure, one of the just a fabulous, I think, piece of legislation that will elicit change through the politics, through the funding, through everything, is the legal requirements set out in the RETA that says, this isn't working. This is important to us. So as we define those things of importance through legislation, then it's not a mystery. It's not a mystery to the public, and it's not a mystery to districts or to the state.
All right. So, boiling it down to one number, people talk about the BSA number and then assume that that's the end all be all. But I think it's the best way to advocate for increasing funding. So you're all very familiar with the pencil chart.
So I'd like to see that this has always been at every legislative function I've ever, and we even have it 20 years. And then the idea is we just showed you how the BSA grows through the formula. The value that the legislature, by voting in our formula, has put on different sections, that more than doubled the original number. So just talking about the BSA doesn't do, I don't think, that the conversation is justice in understanding what do we want for education. Now, the BSA is important because that's the primary function of the child, per child, but it certainly grows. And I always want to correct, I have been an administrator all through those 10 years. And even though it doesn't show money outside the formula, some of those years were really difficult. We were happy to get the $30 billion outside, and that was when, oil was below $50 a barrel. So totally understand that. But we have to acknowledge when we say, and I've heard it, and I tried to correct it, but I can't win. But I'm just not popular with lots of folks, just because while education funding is important and is needed, the other side of the story that just because the BSA has a decrease doesn't mean there hasn't been inputs into public education. I've never seen as much money as I've seen in these 2 years when I've led a district that I had because of all the federal money coming in. Like over those 2 years, there was about almost $60 million coming into Anchorage District alone. And these things are like $30 million for all districts. So I'm not to say that it was good, because I guarantee, and you probably have experience, you all lead businesses, you lead functions. If you don't have a plan and know it's very difficult to plan 5 years out when you're working on every year, you don't know how much money you're going to have. So is it difficult and a pain? Yes. There was times that I just was like betting on stuff just by listening to conversations in the legislature that I would know, no, we're going to get here, even though it wasn't done by that, because I turned in my budget in April to the assembly. That's what I had to do. Or in Matsu, seen it earlier, in March, when I was a superintendent, and the session wasn't over to May. So I just gambled as a leader, just watching trend data and to not give pink slips, to not do this. And I got pretty good at it at the end. So there wasn't, all this mass layoffs, because you knew it just took the legislative steps and to work things out. And I haven't seen anyone that says, no, I don't ever want to give money. It's just this constant, like, it's money, but it's also what are we doing? And are we going to get those things that like people value? And so money outside the formula, just like we got this year, this is a huge boost. It's the largest one-time boost I've ever seen. It's going to do it. It's $175 million in 1 year. But next year, I don't want anyone to be surprised. It's going to start all over because it's outside of the GSA. Now, it spends the same. It spends, all the money outside the formula spends the same. And so for me, I want to always bring like all the information to the people who decide, because just saying that it didn't adjust the BSA didn't mean there wasn't additional money. And I think we leave the public in the dark that nothing has happened, when really through these years, I think some people use some legislative capital to get that money in, and then it's not even acknowledged. But by the same token, I want to say it is much harder to run a school district and plan for the future if you don't know. Think about your own personal budgets. If you were like, I don't know how much I'm going to make this year, you have to plan a little differently. You might not take as many risks. So it's not that one is good or the other. That's the whole story. And when we start to tell the whole story, I just want to think, I truly believe that kids are going to benefit. Education is going to benefit in the end when we tell the whole story and we come together to figure, practice not. That's obviously you back for sending stuff. So we did want to highlight is a lot of big figures and when the formula has been adjusted. So Commissioner mentioned that the district cost factor had gone through a series of changes. It's and the ISO report, and then they invested over a period of 5 years. The CTE factor came into effect in 2012, and then was increased the next year to what over now at the 1.5%. The intensive needs adjustment has changed, and then the correspondence adjustment actually used to be at 0.8 for correspondence, and then was increased to 0.9 here in 2015. But since 2015, there's been 10 years of no changes to the formula, which you could take as it's working really well, being for change, or people got face taking it up. And you can probably tell from I'm biased towards the formula, because you put in the formula what you value, not just a number, right? Not just a BSA. You put what you value in that number and fund those things that you like. And there was several things in this legislative session that said, this is particularly what we want to fund. And that, I think, was beneficial, because then everybody knew what that line is for. All right. For people who like numbers, we have a number of references here that we're going to be using on our next couple of slides. We talk about some statistics. So we did one, just one thing. If you noticed, this was kind of tricky looking at this, and you guys don't have this if you go back one. If you look, really the change in about 10 years, look at the number of kids, went up and then it went back down again for the ADN, it's the number of kids. And then the basic need, look at the states, if you notice, has gone down and basic need has gone up. Why do you think that is? Who's paying more? Basic need is the local contribution. Assessed value in the state of Alaska in places that actually collect taxes or are responsible for that. Assessed value has gone up, and because the formula is based, and she's going to go into that, on a basic need factor. As assessed value goes up in local areas, the state portion changes because there is a requirement of 2.65 mils. Lori's going to talk about really a court case that challenged that in regard to that, like, is it our responsibility or the state's responsibility? So I just wanted to point that out, that little change there.
Statistics in chart format. So we put it here so that it's the state aid, the state entitlement portions of the full basic need, and that basic need again is that adjusted ADM finds the BSA. So this blue portion on top, the full column is the entirety of basic need. The orange part is the state's portion, and then that blue part would be the local the required local contribution, and then the deductible federal impact aid portion on the three pieces of the formula funding.
So to equalize education across the state, there's a formula that talks about the basic need, and a portion of that is paid at the local level. And then each local area has a little fluff in between that they can maximize additional funding. I've worked at Anchorage. There's an additional 100% of what they can give, they give. We've had districts that give 78% of what they can give, 98% of what they can give. And that's based on the local taxes, but it is capped. There's and that's really an equalization formula so that all school districts in Alaska, we don't have the ones that are getting this much money up here and down here. There are two places that do a little bit of different formula, and that's Valdez and Barrow, because their tax base is so a lot different than anywhere else because of the beginning of the pipeline and the end of the pipeline. But generally, there's about a 25% wiggle room on top of if you had like a full container of how much money you could give. The top 25% is the wiggle room at districts at the local level that they can vote locally to increase or not.
Right, and that only works for municipal school districts. This can offer that. REAs obviously have no local tax base. They're unorganized borough, so that's the municipal district. And then again, the gray line on top, if you can make that out, sorry, a little bit bad contrast. That's just trying the trend line of the average student membership. So I know a little bit in the peak, but still actually fairly level, and you see. And now for providing that statewide funded by the other saving membership. So it kind of gives you the per pupils on an expenditure. So again, for it being the state portion of that per pupil expenditure, the blue being the local required contribution, and that federally actually, the other ones, sorry. And then Commissioner said how important is those factors that the formula adds. This gray portion down here, this is our base student allocation. Everything above, that is all what the base student allocation is increased by the factors that are put into the formula. So there's school size factor, district cost factor, special education, intensives, and correspondence.
Just trying to give you a picture about how is the money generated, more so than just a BSA. So just an understanding, a lot has come into play in regard to local responsibilities as well as statewide responsibilities. So we just selected a couple of court cases that talked about those things about the state, what you're responsible for, and local that have been out there, that have been through the court system, and then but have added to. I mean, like I said, we didn't crack this nut yet. Not everybody's happy. People feel like we go to the table, but that we still don't get where we want to go. And so with that, she's going to start with the next
little bit of history. Because it's always important to know where you came from, to know why we are where we are, so that we know where to go forward from. So people wonder, why do we have local contribution? Well, prior to statehood, cities were responsible for providing funding for schools, and then the state could, if it felt like it, contribute and reimburse those cities. So it was the city's responsibility to provide public school services in the territories and before statehood. Okay. So that means that those city school boards, they had the power to raise tax, and then again, create the territory could choose to refund a portion of the school pot. And I did love this language from time to time. I can't believe that I need this. So when the Constitution was drafted, and as we'll discuss in the case later, right, the founders didn't speak specifically to local contributions, and did say that the legislature shall establish and maintain public schools. So that's that from the constitutional, right? The legislature is responsible for public education and establishing and maintaining. So the Ketchikan Gateway Borough back in 2016, there was a designation, so it started earlier, obviously. They questioned what the role is of the city or borough in funding education. They said that the Constitution mandates that the legislature provide funding, and so why do local sources have to do it? Now, their argument was that it is a dedicated funds, and what ended up happening is the court said this is not a dedicated funds issue. The long precedent from territory days was that this is a state and local partnership to provide school funding. So it's non-dedicated funds. This predates the Constitution, even if it did. Take it away. Yes, the value fund.
So interestingly enough, although this case was decided on a particular that a dedicated fund, this argument hasn't gone away. I mean, there's high interest in certain areas already damaged, right? And that was something that some of the justices did bring up in identifying those. Right. But the justices brought it, in their opinion, was that they turned it down on the dedicated fund, but the parties involved, both the state and the borough, deliberately didn't get into the constitutional clause regarding who provides education. And we'll go through the rest of this pretty quick since we don't have much time.
Right. Essentially, it was that they challenged the required local contribution, but they volunteered on an additional local contribution that's allowed being there.
Sweet.
So essentially, again, the courts said it's not a dedicated funds issue, sent it back to performance.
One of the things on the other, it showed the basic need. If you could go back, and this is what we mean by that flexibility. And part of the argument was, wait a minute, the required was 4.2 million, but you gave 3.8 million over that because you had that wiggle room. So why, if you didn't have to do that, so obviously you want to fund schools, so obviously there is a partnership. That was kind of the crux of it.
And I would say that this, there are high been bills introduced, or at least there was one in this current legislative session that would address this, and it proposed to remove the required local and just allow additional locals.
The new town highly concerned disturbance. So the new challenge. So here's another one that is within the last, from 07, within 20 years. And I'm familiar with it because the kids, was from Wasilla High. So I was in the district at the time, so I'm familiar with it. And This one was kind of a split decision, but the state actually found a win, but also got hand-slapped for the manner in which things were done. So I'll share that. So this was really about when we had an assessment for it was the HSGQE, a highly qualified assessment that kids had to pass before they graduate, and it was new higher educational standards put in, and the idea was you didn't adequately fund so that kids can be successful, so that they had an opportunity to be successful. So this was just on the opportunity to learn, and that the question was, is the state adequately funding education? Had you heard that before? The arguments go way back, right? So that's why we wanted to bring these up. So for this case, interestingly enough, based on the evidence presented and the substantial evidence presented in the proceeding, this agrees with the conclusion. So the state wanted, with Commissioner Sampson, that we cannot buy our way out of the problem. So there has to be more than a discussion of money for opportunity to learn and adequacy. Adequacy cannot just be a number on a spreadsheet. If we really want to educate kids, that has to be more than that. And I just want to share that my experience of going to Juneau as an advocate, like more money, and then delivering stuff, and you have like all the different jobs I've had, I've always seen the need and then the responsibility to use the money. Like, hold us account. Like, accountability is a real thing. Like, that doesn't go away anywhere else. And I've never shied away from responsibility, but that is the crux of it. And then so when you say, okay, we'll do responsibility, what does success mean? Which then is a bigger issue. So to think that it's really easy is it just goes into multiple layers. So we'll just go through this really fast so that you can have, basically what they took out one of the quotes in the briefs that the courts did to say, we can't buy our way out of this. Like, it has to be more. We have to have a discussion of what you're spending the money on, not just the money. And what they did was look at different school districts that actually joined, and a lot of information came from UPIC where they found, hey, we did give you more money, but they never hired one more teacher. You never put more money into the classroom where it matters the most. That's the GIMBA. That's what the values added. You hired more administrators, not school administrators. You hired district office administrators. So, and I've had all of those positions. I've been a teacher, a coach, and administrator. So I couldn't get it. Where do we get to decide when people fund, and by the people, I mean legislators who are elected by the people, have a determination of how it's all done so that the goal that we all want gets there. And the goal is that kids succeed, that they can know and be able to do things, right? So this is just another way to look at it. And of course, it goes just into the particulars of like how they got to the case, but it's essentially based on what are you spending your money on? So that's why the discussion of, what are we spending our money on, and deliberateness of legislators to say, I highly value, we have a senator in the room, I highly value high quality preparation and national board. I want to pay for that. Those are the types of discussions, whether you agree that or not, that's the type of thing we're talking about. Like, this is what we want, so now let's pay for it. But the difference of we want you to get federal without getting paid causes conflict at the local level. It's all there. So, but we could just go right through this. So where the state got their hand slapped is said that you provide, and great, you gave money, but you never gave oversight to these districts where kids aren't learning. So start giving oversight on kids learning. It was basically in the state. And from that, the state had, some accountability measures cooked in there. At the same time, right after this happened, the whole Common Core thing happened, and there were higher standards anyway. So a lot of federal things fell into this, but essentially the more was about adequacy has to have a larger conversation than just money. So hence, we just, is it adequate? Is there enough money? Are we doing what we need to do for kids and educators? We can go on to the next one. Yeah, here's some things we thought, like the The formula doesn't consider requirements imposed externally and that accountability. So the formula doesn't look at what you're asked to do at the district level, nor does it take into account what you need to do at the district level, right? It's that whole, I'll give you money, if you're accountable. There always are new testing and measures, but one of the things I shared already, that Lost the Reads Act is crystal clear about what you're supposed to do. And that's one thing that we did define, and there's a senator in here that I don't pen a lot of that. So it's just a really good demonstration of these are the inputs we want by broadening pre-K, giving additional money, but these are also the things that we have to do for children. Why do districts always seem to need more? Inflation is real. Of course it is. It's real everywhere. And we want to truly, districts truly want to do more for their kids. But the formula, as it is today, is set up for the results it's getting. And that is our little lesson, if you will. Jennifer Johnston asked us she challenged to say, get us into some detail that you guys could use for discussions later as folks. So we're open to questions, or I hope I could make any confusion, please, but I love this stuff. I believe in public education. It's a good thing for us, and I know we're going to get to a place that families and kids benefit.
Great. Thank you.
Hey, you guys have got to beat. That's there. I'm used to being a fool. You always, Jennifer, do you want to join in? And can you come in to help with some of the questions?
Again, you've got cards on your tables to write down any questions that you may have.
Should they, we use the whole time in not make what should they there and also how to be. I'm the hot seat.
I'll start with one is because as you started out the total conversations, and you basically said that the state gives the district money. And we also know that there was just a kick porkies on this. So when you, from the state level, start maybe emphasizing what you want for the money, where does that actually come into play? Because the money goes to the district basically as a block rate, right? Once the district gets the funds, there is no accountability. Am I right?
There's a good question. There is accountability in making sure there's audits done, that there isn't fraud, if you will. There's good accountability. So it's not, but accountability in what is the return on our investment, that is really the essential thing I think she's talked about. Like if we gave more money, so like look at the CTE, we gave more money for CTE. There isn't any kind of report that needs to be done by districts that says, this is how we can increase our CTP. That's not in the law. So it's not, there isn't a requirement by the department or by districts to give it to us if we ask for it. It would have to be relational capacity. Hey, what do you do for CTE because you got extra money? But as administrators, we can't demand any information from the local level unless it's in law for, statute or regulation. So the idea that it's like, it's just all given, but there isn't like, we gave and we meant for that to go to CTE. Did you actually use it for CTE? That's not built into the law or the formula.
This was actually online. The state has acknowledged our labor shortage and is seeking innovative measures to fill this, while simultaneously at least basically recognize the impacts of inflation on education. In short, I'm wondering why the residential schools, which are impacted the most by inflation, as they operate 24/7 and serve to address the labor shortage through the provision of a skilled Alaskan workforce, are not being more supported as a result. And
sure. I don't know the why. I know that I think most likely my guess is that the bigger issue of school districts the residential schools are schools, so they were supported through schools. There is a separate formula for residential schools. It wasn't the largest talk. What gets talked about is what is advocated through folks, legislators and lobbyists. I don't know the why, but I can tell you my guess is that the bigger picture of school funding for all districts, no matter what kind of school you have, was the bigger topic.
And I will add that the stipend program that we have for the residential program. Those stipends are set out in statute. Sorry, just take a trend. That's my brain here. And I believe that there have been increases for the last 3 years. It's been supplemental funding to provide additional slightly larger stipends. So it haven't changed the statute, but again, it's kind of like outside the formula funding. Their residents have also received some outside the formula funding the last 2 years and will to this next year. So
the READS Act requires extra staffing resources. In the last full year, Ignite education was interrupted for 6 weeks while Ignite teachers did testing for the Anchorage School District. How much additional funding went along with the READS Act for the implementations?
Sure. So additional funding, particularly for the READS Act, I'd have to get that. There was initially millions of dollars, actually $6 to $8 million in training, and that was to meet the requirements in the law for educators to be trained and offer the services, as well as to buy materials for schools. The actual organization at the district level to meet some of those requirements were district level decisions. Granted, we did hear feedback from folks during the year that said, you know, once my kids get an individualized reading plan, there is some extra work outside of the day. Some districts use title monies to do that. Some districts had staffing staggered so that they could meet those needs. Some districts obviously pooled other educators to assist with some of those parts. So the meaning of it is at a different level. With the 680, the expectation is to that some of those funds would be used for the READS Act, I believe. There was work, and I advocated for this, to do direct spending to K through 3. If we want particularly these things to happen, we should fund them. But the idea is it is present. And the idea that I will never, no matter how, like saying that the READS Act is an unfunded mandate and we could get there, but learning to read and be illiterate is the primary function of schools. And so I just can't go there. I can't go that it's, granted, is it hard, it takes tricky, it does take extra resources, but what you do is that balance what we have with what we need to do. So I'm happy that there's additional funds going in because it is hard work, and it is going to be best served when you can, offer additional staffing.
I have to laugh. It's pencil chart, and I first read it as penal chart stuff. Pencil chart doesn't account for inflation. How has that affected spending and ability of districts to meet need? Where does research and effective school guides come into play with discussion of school funding and fiscal incentive to consolidate and not consolidate schools?
So I shared the consolidation, not consolidation. It by the formula, you see why small schools, like when you had 250 in a school that is filled for 700, you're kind of okay with that because it's a funding unit. That's how you get money first. With the change in legislation that happened, I was in the Anchorage School District and we advocated for it because our board knew that we needed to consolidate, but the moving us over, it actually costs money to board up a school. Like when you stop using it, there's money that it takes to shut down a school, right? To move kids, to move the furniture, to shut down the systems, to board it up. So it costs money. So there wasn't an incentive to do that. I would say that the hold harmless bill that the legislature did, I don't know, it had to be, I was in from 16 to 22 as an ASD, so maybe it happened around 18 or 19, 18. That actually was one of the impetus that we asked for in Anchorage to be able to do it. And as you know, since then, Anchorage is clicking away at that to be able to utilize that hold harmless. In regard to the pencils chart, I'll say again, the BSA has been constant. The money to education has grown, has been, do you see? So outside the formula money, just like we talked about boarding schools, doesn't show up as much, but there has been additional funds those years. We can argue about the amount being not enough. I'd like to say nothing's ever enough. I'd love to do more for kids, but there has been outside funding. It's just been given in a different way. The pencils only represent the BSA. My goal today was to say, how is the value of the BSA put into action? The value of that BSA is in what you want it to be spent for, or those multipliers.
Can you talk about adequate funding stipulation and consent decree for more?
Sure. The adequate funding said that the discussion and the ruling that the state of Alaska was not adequately funding schools is just not, that they did not belong with the Moores in that case. They said, no, the state made, because basically not about the money, but that you can't, the Constitution didn't just say, give money. The state has been given money. What it said is you have to have a discussion about what you're getting for that money. What is that money paid for? And then the part where the state took, had it ruled against it was that then you need to start to account for that. Our children who are, and they use the assessments, who are failing the assessments, not getting their high school diploma because of HSGQA. What are you doing as a state to dig in there with local districts to find out why and to supervise that and to, and really traditionally, the finance side, and Lori and I talk, has always had some type of, like, if you don't turn in your audit, you don't get your state aid on the 15th. There's always been a consequence for the money part. The other part that we all care about as well, equally, the learning, it's more nebulous. There isn't a statutory requirement for it, so it's built off of just our willingness to do better.
Just how many years is the full-time Ross born?
So it's the consolidation provision is a step down over 4 years. So I believe it's the first 2 years you get 100% of what you would have otherwise. It's 175, yeah. It's another maybe 66 and 33. Yeah. So.
And this person's wondering what's included in the district costs.
Mark, I do not have that in front of me, but I think it's about, yeah, I see a lot of pictures. It's about 12 different factors that actually had those come across my desk, but I can't remember. But
we have a member of ICER here.
Yeah, you did the original. It includes everything from differentiated trauma costs to the costs of materials that are in schools. It is a formula that, at this point, not just that it hasn't been updated, but the actual mechanism by which it was done at this point needs to be examined. It's something we're interested in, because it shouldn't have to be a huge $250,000. And every time we do this, and we'd really like to work out what would be a more streamlined way of having it done. The other piece was, Pfizer was very clear that it should not have been put in over time. That was not our recommendation, but that was a way to make it a little easier for districts. So it's done been losing money, I think. It's so they stepped them down. And the other piece was, we were very clear that energy costs need to be looked at separately, not necessarily taken out, but at least if there's a huge doubt, because exactly what happened, the budget districts got more funding, and then energy costs, you all remember, in 2008, skyrocketed for the next few years. And so most districts that got more money actually didn't see more money classrooms to continue out to heat schools. And so we really think that there needs to be a conversation that moves up allocating the formula, but also what are the things we should be paying attention to, so that if the energy costs jump suddenly and something else happens, there's a way to account for that, and it's hold harmless for those districts, because there are certain pieces of that formula that just are not.
any other questions?
I just want to say that as Lynetta Commonwealth North is going to continue this conversation with some other presentations, but we're also going to start a policy group for people to have a more robust discussion, because it does seem that education is one of those discussions that we all need to be fully engaged in, and Commonwealth North wants to help in that engagement. And I want to thank both of you. Nice pictures.
We said make it picture.
I've been very familiar and had to deal with the BSA for a long time, and I was always impressed that because it was just complicated enough, and a lot of even elected officials didn't understand it, but we could understand the one-liner, raise the BSA, just drop the BSA. And I just feel if we're going to really make a difference in education and an impact, we have to understand the BSA, and we have to understand the local contribution, and what that, there is a cap to that, and that's actually a federal cap. And so nothing is simple, but I know that we're up to it. And I know that we can make education what it should be in this state. The state was founded on a strong education, and I think we should be doing that as a grandmother.
Congratulations. Yeah, Pete. So we have our contact information. You can contact us, and just want to, again, this is from our experiences in the state. Lori's at the state level and mine as both. And I never let it go that no matter where generally where you speak to something is where you have to sit every day. So you have to make a stand on something where you sit. But there's lots of different ideas and information that would like to join in on to really provide for our students and families the best education in Alaska. And I'm interested in them staying in Alaska too. So yeah.
Please join me in one more again for kids tonight.